Picture a young woman standing alone on a rain-drenched sidewalk, clutching her protruding belly while searching for any sign of hope. Just hours ago, she was the beloved wife of a charming millionaire, but in a single twist of cruel fate, she found herself homeless, penniless, and on the brink of despair. The scent of betrayal still fresh in the air. She fought back tears, determined to uncover how everything had gone so terribly wrong. This is the story of shattered vows, a cruel mistress with secrets of her own, and a legal battle that would shake a fortune to its core. Rebecca Martin had never considered herself a lucky person until she met Daniel Martin. They first locked eyes at a charity gala in New York City, an event run by a mutual acquaintance, Sarah Patterson, a prominent philanthropist. At the time, Daniel was already on the fast track to becoming a millionaire through shrewd real estate investments. Tall, dark-haired, and with a confident air about him, Daniel swept Rebecca off her feet. He dazzled her not just with his money and connections, but with an easy charisma that felt sincere. Raised in a modest household in upstate New York, Rebecca had always valued honesty and hard work. She never dreamed she'd marry into wealth. Contentment to her was a small apartment filled with love and laughter. Yet Daniel's courtship was so compelling, he indulged her in Sunday picnics in Central Park, introduced her to glamorous fashion events, and always made time for her despite his busy schedule. Their wedding, held at a historic chateau in France, felt like a modern-day fairy tale. At first, things were blissful. Even though Daniel's business traveled him from city to city, they found time for each other. Rebecca trusted him implicitly. She had no reason to suspect that beneath his polished exterior lurked a man capable of betrayal so deep it would knock the wind out of her life. By the time Rebecca discovered she was pregnant, she and Daniel had been married for 3 years. News of the baby filled her with excitement and a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel seemed thrilled at the idea of fatherhood. He showed her glossy catalogues of baby furniture and started talking about moving to a bigger suburban mansion near the Hamptons. Rebecca's heart overflowed with joy. She envisioned a cozy home with a lush backyard where their child could run free. During the first few months of her pregnancy, Daniel remained attentive. He insisted on hiring a personal chef to ensure her meals were nutritious, scheduled spa treatments to ease her morning sickness, and even accompanied her to prenatal checkups when he could carve out the time. But as Rebecca's second trimester began, Daniel's behavior shifted ever so subtly. Suddenly, business calls claimed more of his nights. Rebecca would wake up in the middle of the night to find the other side of the bed cold and undisturbed. Days went by without real conversations, and Daniel's short messages were often riddled with excuses, last-minute flights to Los Angeles, urgent investor conferences, or vital real estate closings in Chicago. Rebecca tried to ignore the warning signs, believing that Daniel's strange distance was just the pressure of supporting their growing family. A few weeks into her second trimester, Rebecca thought she noticed a faint, unfamiliar perfume lingering on Daniel's blazer. It smelled flowery, like lilacs in bloom. Uncertain, she convinced herself it was just some cologne sample from a high-end men's store in Manhattan. After all, Daniel was a meticulous dresser who never shied away from splurging on luxury items. But then odd receipts began showing up. A jewelry store invoice in Beverly Hills, a posh restaurant receipt from a place they had never visited together. Rebecca's heart began pounding whenever she found these trinkets of suspicion. Still, she hesitated to jump to conclusions. She recalled how Daniel had once surprised her with an expensive watch purchased on a business trip to California. Perhaps he was planning another grand surprise. She tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, loved him too dearly to assume the worst. Yet deep inside worry started to gnaw at her. Daniel's mounting impatience and distance only fueled her anxiety. He brushed off her questions with vague answers. "It's a client's dinner. I took a colleague out to discuss a deal, or you're overthinking." In a night of restless sleep, a cold sense of dread settled over her. Something was definitely wrong. Rebecca first met Vanessa Moore, the woman who would turn her world inside out during a swanky real estate conference in Miami. Daniel invited Rebecca to attend, hoping to combine business with a brief seaside getaway. Vanessa was introduced as the hotshot new marketing director at one of Daniel's partner firms. She was impossibly beautiful auburn hair that glowed under the Florida sun designer dresses that hugged every curve, and an uncanny knack for charming a room full of potential investors. Rebecca recalled feeling a twinge of discomfort when she caught Daniel and Vanessa sharing a knowing smile across the conference hall. It was subtle, an unspoken understanding that Rebecca couldn't quite place, but she tried to dismiss it, reminding herself not to let jealousy overshadow what was meant to be a pleasant trip. Throughout the weekend, Rebecca noticed Daniel and Vanessa frequently conferring in corners, discussing numbers, business strategies, and new deals. Every time Rebecca approached the conversation, ended abruptly, replaced by polite small talk. Vanessa would flash her a saccharine smile, occasionally asking about the pregnancy, in a tone that felt more obligatory than genuinely concerned. Little did Rebecca know that Miami conference would mark the beginning of the slow unraveling of her marriage. A few days after returning from Miami, Daniel came home late from a supposed client meeting. He smelled of sandalwood and that distinctive floral perfume. But this time, it was stronger, almost as if it were clinging to his skin. Rebecca's heart thundered in her chest as she confronted him. "Daniel, where were you? I called you 12 times," she said, her voice quivering between worry and anger. He mumbled an excuse about a hectic dinner with potential investors. His eyes darted around the room, never quite meeting her gaze. That night, Rebecca felt an invisible wall forming between them, an emotional barrier that had never been there before. Her suspicions hardened the following day, when she found an earring tucked into the passenger seat of Daniel's BMW, a delicate gold stud with a tiny emerald. She had never worn such jewelry. Confronting Daniel, she asked if he recognized it. His face paled, yet he denied knowing anything about it. This was the point of no return for Rebecca. Even though he refused to admit it, she recognized the earring from the conference in Miami. She had seen Vanessa wearing an identical pair glittering in the sun during one of the panel discussions. Devastated yet determined, Rebecca decided to dig deeper. She needed hard evidence to confront Daniel about his infidelity. With every day that passed, she feared more for her unborn baby's future. How could she raise a child in a crumbling marriage built on deceit? In an uncharacteristic burst of courage, she reached out to Sarah Patterson, the philanthropic friend who had introduced them in the first place. Sarah had a wide network of connections in the elite circles of Manhattan. If anyone could verify Daniel's dealings, it was Sarah over coffee in a discreet corner of a posh Upper East Side cafe. Rebecca relayed her suspicions. Tears welled in her eyes as she explained how distant Daniel had become. The late nights and the gold stud earring. Sarah listened intently. Her expression turned grim. "I've heard some unsettling rumors, Rebecca," she confessed, "about Daniel's business dealings, and Vanessa Moore people have spotted them at private clubs. He hasn't been discreet." Hearing Sarah's words was a knife twisting in Rebecca's chest. She felt betrayed, but more urgently, she felt a fierce, maternal need to protect her child. She had to confront Daniel, but she knew that a confrontation without strategy could lead to disastrous consequences. Sarah offered to connect Rebecca with a private investigator. She trusted a gruff man named Kevin Walsh, formerly of the NYPD. Kevin was known for handling discreet, high-stakes cases involving wealthy clients. If anyone could unearth the truth, it was him. At first, Rebecca felt guilty about hiring someone to spy on her husband. But the more she thought about Daniel's lies, the more convinced she became that it was the only way forward. Within a week, Kevin compiled a thorough dossier. The findings were worse than Rebecca had imagined. Photos of Daniel and Vanessa entering high-end hotels at odd hours. Records of lavish gifts purchased under dummy corporate accounts. Even receipts showing Vanessa's name on flight tickets alongside Daniel's. The evidence painted a picture of a full-blown affair, not just a fling. Grief overwhelmed Rebecca. How could the man she once adored betray her so openly? How could he flaunt his affair without even attempting to hide the receipts? Yet beneath the heartbreak lay a simmering anger. Rebecca was carrying his child, Daniel's child. How dare he lie to her face and jeopardize their baby's future for the sake of a reckless, humiliating affair? Determined to confront Daniel with irrefutable proof, Rebecca waited for him in their penthouse living room one late evening. The city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a cold glow on the minimalist decor Daniel had insisted upon. As soon as he stepped through the door, Rebecca demanded that he sit. She laid out Kevin's photos and receipts on the coffee table. Daniel's face, hardened denial swirling in his eyes. "You're out of line." "Rebecca," he said, voice quaking with a mixture of rage and shame. "You hired a private investigator to follow me." "Yes, I did. And it seems I had every reason to." She shot back, her fury overshadowing her heartbreak. "Why, Daniel? I'm your wife. We're about to have a child. Why would you do this?" He didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched painfully, broken only by the muffled hum of traffic below. Finally, Daniel stood, took one sweeping glance at the damning evidence, and walked away. His final words before he retreated to the master bedroom echoed like thunder. "You should have trusted me. Now you've gone too far." That night, Daniel slept in the guest room. Rebecca cried herself to sleep, unsure of how much further this crack in her marriage would spread. Over the following days, Rebecca tried to speak with Daniel about the future of their marriage and the well-being of their unborn child. But Daniel was evasive. He left early in the morning, dodged her calls throughout the day, and returned late at night, sometimes not returning at all. The emotional distance between them grew until it felt like a gaping chasm. Then, one dreadful evening, Daniel dropped an unexpected bombshell. He stomped into the penthouse, face contorted in anger, brandishing a set of documents. He claimed that Rebecca's erratic behavior and unfounded accusations were jeopardizing his reputation and business relationships. "Sign these," he demanded, slamming them on the kitchen island. "It's a separation agreement. Let's handle this cleanly and avoid a media spectacle. You'll receive a fixed sum. But I want you out by the end of the week." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted across the document, scanning words like spousal settlement gag clause and no future claims. The sum offered was meager, insulting, really considering Daniel's extensive assets. She looked up, tears hot on her cheeks. "What about our baby, Daniel?" she asked, her voice nearly breaking. "You can't just buy me off and walk away." He said nothing, just turned and left the apartment. That was the moment Rebecca realized the man she thought she knew was gone. With no time to grieve, Rebecca found herself frantic. She was 5 months pregnant and staring at the bleak reality of becoming homeless if she didn't comply with Daniel's demands. The penthouse lease, ironically, was under one of Daniel's shell corporations, giving him every legal right to evict her. The bank accounts she had access to were suddenly frozen. Credit cards declined whenever she tried to buy groceries or pay bills. Desperate, Rebecca sought out legal counsel. Through Sarah Patterson's recommendations, she hired Joanna Larkin, a tenacious family law attorney known for her fearlessness in taking on high-profile divorces. Joanna reviewed the separation agreement and shook her head in dismay. "This is outrageous!" Joanna growled. "He's blatantly trying to force you to settle for crumbs." Rebecca explained her predicament, tears brimming once more. "I can't even pay my cell phone bill," she whispered. "He's cut me off from everything." Joanna leaned back, her stern gaze unwavering. "We can fight this, but it won't be easy. Daniel is powerful and well-connected. He's probably lawyered up with the best in town. We'll need a strong strategy." Rebecca clung to that small spark of hope. She was determined not only to protect herself, but to fight for a secure future for her child. The next few weeks felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Joanna filed an emergency motion to secure temporary spousal support and block the eviction, arguing that Daniel's unborn child deserved financial provision. Despite her efforts, the judge required a hearing to evaluate both sides' claims. In the interim, Daniel's attorneys pressed relentlessly, piling on allegations that Rebecca was emotionally unstable and a threat to Daniel's professional standing. On top of it all, rumors began circulating in the upper crust of Manhattan society. Word spread that Rebecca was demanding astronomical sums from Daniel, painting her as a gold digger who had trapped him with a pregnancy. Newspaper gossip columns hinted at irreconcilable differences, conveniently omitting the affair or Daniel's manipulative use of shell corporations. Rebecca was living a nightmare. She found it increasingly difficult to sleep. Her prenatal doctor warned her about stress levels harming the baby. Yet each day seemed worse than the last. No matter how many times she told her side of the story, the wealthy circles seemed more inclined to believe Daniel's carefully curated version. Amid all this turmoil, a wave of shock hit her when she received a formal letter from Daniel's attorneys stating that she must vacate the penthouse immediately. If she refused, they would escalate matters in court with her back against the wall. Rebecca made an agonizing decision. She packed a few essentials into a suitcase, maternity clothes, personal documents, and keepsakes from her mother, and vacated the penthouse. She couldn't risk an ugly confrontation that could jeopardize her health or her child's. With nowhere else to go, she temporarily moved into a small guest room in Sarah Patterson's brownstone. Sarah tried to make her feel at home, but the emotional weight was crushing. Rebecca found herself curled up at night, weeping silently, questioning how her fairy tale marriage had deteriorated into this tragic fiasco. Meanwhile, Daniel's public persona thrived. He was photographed at exclusive galas, beaming beside influential friends, no hint of remorse on his face. Word on the street was that he had even secured a lucrative partnership to expand his real estate empire into Europe. In some circles, they still viewed him as a devoted husband prepping for fatherhood. In reality, his pregnant wife was sleeping on a friend's pull-out couch, terrified about the future. Yet, in the swirling chaos, a surprising ally emerged from the shadows. Vanessa Moore, the very mistress who had entangled Daniel in a scandalous affair. Rebecca couldn't fathom why, but she was about to find out one brisk November morning as Rebecca sipped herbal tea in Sarah's kitchen. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but a strange gut feeling made her answer. "Rebecca, it's Vanessa Moore." "Please don't hang up." A chill coursed through Rebecca. She instinctively tightened her grip on the phone. "What do you want?" she managed through gritted teeth. Vanessa's voice sounded hollow. devoid of the haughty confidence she'd displayed in Miami. "I need to talk to you. It's about Daniel. And, well, about everything you're going through. There's more you need to know," skeptical and resentful. Rebecca almost dismissed her, but desperation overruled her anger. If Vanessa possessed information that could turn the tide in her favor, she had to listen. After a long pause, Rebecca agreed to meet at a small cafe near Hudson Yards, far from the prying eyes of society tabloids. That afternoon, wearing oversized sunglasses and a hooded coat to avoid recognition, Rebecca walked into the cafe with trembling hands. She spotted Vanessa, seated in a corner booth, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans. For once, the other woman looked unassuming. Even anxious, Rebecca braced herself. She had no idea if this meeting would provide a lifeline or inflict another deep wound. Vanessa's eyes were red-rimmed, her face gaunt, as if sleep had eluded her for days. She sat hunched over her coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly with a trembling hand. The confident, glamorous woman Rebecca had seen in Miami was gone. In her place sat someone haunted. "I know I'm the last person you want to see, Vanessa," began her voice low and uncertain. "But I need you to hear me out." Rebecca didn't speak. She folded her arms and studied Vanessa with wary eyes, unsure if this was a trap or a strange form of guilt. Vanessa took a shaky breath. It started as business. "Daniel approached me with promises. Career growth, exposure, influence. I was ambitious and foolish. He knew exactly what strings to pull. The affair didn't happen all at once. It was gradual. But once I was in, he made sure I couldn't easily get out." Rebecca's stomach twisted. Hearing this woman admit to seducing her husband or being seduced was both infuriating and oddly humanizing. Vanessa continued, "He used me. And when I tried to leave, he reminded me who held the power. But it's not just about us. I found things, documents, emails, money, transfers. Daniel's not just cheating on you, he's cheating the law. I think he's laundering money through shell companies, and some of them have my name on the paperwork. I never signed those forms. He forged them." Rebecca blinked. "You expect me to believe you're a victim? I know how it sounds," Vanessa said quickly, "but I'm terrified, Rebecca. If anything goes public, I go down with him. I'm here because I think we can help each other, expose him, protect ourselves." A long silence stretched between them. Rebecca looked down at her swollen belly, then back at the woman across the table. She had every reason to walk away, but something in Vanessa's voice, in her trembling hands, told her the fear was real. "If you're lying to me," Rebecca whispered. "I'm not Vanessa," replied. "I've got proof I brought it with me." For several seconds, Rebecca stared at the manila folder Vanessa slid across the table. It was stuffed with papers, some hastily printed, others annotated in ink. Her instinct screamed not to trust the woman who had helped destroy her marriage, but she couldn't deny the desperation in Vanessa's eyes. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, wire transfer logs, internal memos, and a spreadsheet detailing unusual financial patterns. "He used at least 5 shell companies," Vanessa said, pointing to a series of transfers that bounced money between accounts in the Caymans and Delaware. "Some of them bear my name on corporate filings. I never authorized any of this." Rebecca scanned one memo that included her husband's signature next to a forged one from Vanessa. "Why are you doing this now?" she asked. Vanessa's voice cracked. "Because I'm scared, and because I didn't sign up for this. I was naive, yes, but I didn't agree to become a criminal's scapegoat." Rebecca's emotions were a tangled mess of resentment, disbelief, and cold curiosity. You do realize you helped destroy my life. I know, and I'm sorry, Vanessa whispered. But Daniel's real enemy isn't you or me. It's the truth. And it's catching up to him. Rebecca looked at the evidence again. If what Vanessa said was true, Daniel wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a man capable of ruining multiple lives without blinking. For the first time since this nightmare began, Rebecca saw a glimmer of power shifting in her favor. You realize, she said slowly, this changes everything. Vanessa nodded. I want out, and if that means teaming up with you, then so be it. Rebecca didn't trust Vanessa, not yet. But she trusted facts, and these documents were explosive. Give me this folder. I'll take it to my lawyer. If anything in here is fake, it's not. Then this may be the beginning of the end for Daniel Martin. Rebecca wasted no time. She contacted Joanna Larkin, her razor-sharp attorney, and arranged an emergency meeting at her Midtown office. Joanna cleared her afternoon schedule. When Rebecca walked in with Vanessa's folder, clutched tightly in hand, Joanna raised an eyebrow. Tell me this is what I think it is, Joanna said. Rebecca placed the folder on the desk and exhaled slowly. It's the truth, and it's damning. As Joanna flipped through the documents, her sharp eyes darted from page to page. Vanessa sat quietly nearby, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. Joanna finally looked up. If this is authentic, we have more than enough to scare Daniel, possibly enough to sink him. But we need proof. It's all real, Rebecca added. We can't afford to bring false claims to court, Joanna. Nodded. Agreed. I'll bring in a forensic accounting team to verify everything. If this checks out, we'll have leverage, not just in family court, but maybe with federal prosecutors. Vanessa leaned forward. I have more. I've been archiving emails and texts, voice memos too. I didn't know if I'd ever use them, but I kept everything, just in case. Joanna's expression shifted from cautious to intrigued. That just made you a star witness. But it also makes you a target. I already feel like one, Vanessa murmured. As the documents were copied and the forensic team notified, Joanna pulled Rebecca aside. I know this isn't ideal, aligning with the woman who hurt you. But if she's telling the truth, and I think she is, this alliance might be your best shot at not just surviving, but winning. Rebecca glanced over at Vanessa, then at her own trembling hands. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for my daughter. Joanna nodded solemnly. Then let's make sure this baby is born into a world where her father is held accountable. In that moment, Rebecca's pain hardened into purpose. They weren't just going to expose Daniel. They were going to destroy his empire, one forged signature at a time. No matter how fierce the legal battle, real life continued. Rebecca was growing bigger by the day. The toll of stress and anxiety, sometimes manifested in dizzy spells or bouts of insomnia. To protect her mental and physical health, she began attending a prenatal yoga class and joined a support group for expectant mothers dealing with difficult personal circumstances. Though none of their stories quite matched hers, none of them were battling a millionaire adulterer with potential criminal ties. Rebecca found solace in the empathetic community. Some offered her gently worn baby clothes. Others shared uplifting stories of how they overcame adversity. In a world that felt increasingly cold, these small acts of kindness felt like beacons of light. Meanwhile, Daniel's name continued to glitter in business magazines. He was hailed as a visionary investor, poised to redefine luxury living. Every headline was salt in Rebecca's wounds, but it only steeled her resolve. She found strength in envisioning a future where she and her child were free from Daniel's manipulative clutches. At night, she gently caressed her belly, whispering, "We'll be okay, I promise." The baby's soft kicks sometimes felt like encouragement, a reminder that she had a profound reason to fight on one snowy December morning. Joanna called an emergency meeting at her law office. Rebecca arrived to find both Joanna and Vanessa already there, flanked by 2 forensic accountants. Spread across a large conference table were piles of documents, highlighted spreadsheets, and phone records. "We've verified enough to proceed," Joanna announced gravely. "Daniel has been orchestrating financial fraud for years. This is no small-time scheme. This is systematic." She explained how Daniel's shell corporations had laundered money from international clients who preferred to remain off the radar. Some of these funds likely fueled political contributions and shady real estate deals across state lines. Moreover, Joanna's team discovered that Daniel had transferred a significant portion of assets into accounts bearing Vanessa's name without her explicit consent. If exposed, both Vanessa and Daniel could be liable for any criminal fallout. However, Vanessa's cooperation and the evidence she provided could grant her partial immunity if law enforcement got involved. Rebecca felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting again. She and her baby had been mere pawns in Daniel's high-stakes game. But now she possessed the means to fight back. "We need a plan," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Joanna proposed a bold strategy. They would use the threat of exposing Daniel's fraudulent activities to negotiate a more equitable divorce settlement for Rebecca. This included substantial child support, spousal support, and property rights that would secure a comfortable life for Rebecca and her baby. Meanwhile, Vanessa would have her own separate legal counsel to navigate the potential criminal charges. Vanessa agreed, stating that her only goal was to extricate herself from Daniel's toxic orbit. "I never wanted to hurt you," she told Rebecca, eyes downcast. "I was blinded by ambition, and Daniel exploited that. I'm sorry." Though forgiveness was not immediate, Rebecca felt a strange empathy. Both of them had been manipulated in different ways by a man who was accustomed to getting whatever he wanted. Now they had an opportunity to rewrite the narrative. Still, they had to tread carefully. Daniel's lawyers were relentless, and his political connections ran deep. He might attempt to silence them, discredit them, or even turn the tables with false counter-accusations. Joanna advised Rebecca and Vanessa to maintain a low profile and avoid any leaks to the media until they formally confronted Daniel. The stakes had never been higher, and they all knew it. A few days later, a thick grey envelope arrived at Sarah Patterson's brownstone, where Rebecca was still staying. Inside were legal documents from Daniel's team, requesting an immediate hearing to finalize the separation agreement. The letter threatened that if Rebecca did not comply, Daniel would pursue defamation claims and demand punitive damages for emotional distress and professional harm. Rebecca's hands shook as she read the letter. She wasn't just fighting for her survival. She was fighting for her baby's rightful support. Over the next few nights, she alternated between fear and outrage. Daniel's willingness to destroy her reputation and security was shocking, yet not surprising anymore. The hearing date was set for mid-January, just a month away from her due date. Joanna insisted that they move swiftly with their evidence. "We'll file a counter-motion," she explained. "We'll present the documents proving Daniel's fraudulent actions, and we'll threaten to share everything with federal investigators if he doesn't negotiate fairly. It's risky, but it might be our best shot." Rebecca agreed, though. Every cell in her body braced for the storm that was about to break. She looked down at her growing belly, whispering silent reassurances to her child. Whatever happened, she wouldn't stop fighting. In the swirling chaos, Sarah Patterson stepped up in an extraordinary way. Aware of the emotional and financial strain on Rebecca, she reached out to her extensive network of influential friends, urging them to support Rebecca's upcoming legal battle. Some responded by offering discreet financial contributions to Joanna's law firm. Others, including a respected journalist from the New York Times, expressed interest in investigating Daniel's business practices. Simultaneously, Vanessa quietly began cooperating with a federal investigator who specialized in white-collar crimes. She was careful to keep her involvement a secret from Daniel. Their plan was to gather enough incriminating evidence to make Daniel realize that refusing to settle could lead to a catastrophic criminal indictment. Rebecca was caught between hope and terror. On the one hand, she felt buoyed by the newfound support. On the other, she dreaded how Daniel would respond if he discovered they were about to blow his illegal empire apart. All it would take was one slip, one breach of confidentiality, and Daniel could unleash a legal barrage or worse. Yet the memory of being left pregnant and homeless fueled her resolve. She vowed that no matter the cost, she would secure a future for her child, free from the dark cloud of Daniel's influence. January arrived with a biting cold that seemed to seep into Rebecca's bones. Snow clung to the city's edges, dirty slush lining the streets, as though the city itself was bracing for a fight. The morning of the court hearing dawned grey and ominous. Rebecca stood in front of the mirror, slipping into a simple black maternity dress that clung softly to her 7-month belly. She added a wool coat, black leather gloves, and a scarf. Sarah had knitted her. Her heart pounded as Joanna's car pulled up in front of Sarah's brownstone inside. Joanna greeted her with a firm nod. "Today's the beginning of the end," she said. "Stay calm, no matter what Daniel's team throws at you." The courthouse loomed like a fortress. Daniel was already there, flanked by his sleek team of high-powered attorneys. He wore an immaculate navy suit and a cold, unreadable expression. He didn't acknowledge Rebecca, but she caught the tight clench of his jaw when he noticed her swollen belly. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The judge, a tall, no-nonsense woman with silver-streaked hair, took her seat. Daniel's lawyers launched their attack first. "Your Honor," one of them began, oozing with feigned civility. "We contend that Mrs. Martin has repeatedly violated our client's privacy and acted in erratic, emotionally unstable ways. She hired a private investigator, disseminated defamatory statements, and continues to demand excessive financial compensation." Rebecca's pulse thundered in her ears. She held Joanna's hand under the table, grounding herself in the present. Then it was Joanna's turn. Calm, composed, and razor-sharp, she rose. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Martin has engaged in financial deceit using shell corporations to conceal assets. We are not here to sling mud. We are here to protect a woman abandoned while pregnant, financially cut off and vilified in the media. We are here to demand what is rightfully hers and her unborn child's." Joanna slid several documents to the judge: transaction records, corporate filings, and real estate deeds that told a very different story than Daniel's team had painted. The judge's expression shifted. "Mr. Martin, these discrepancies are serious. Can your counsel explain the inconsistencies in these property transfers and hidden accounts?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. His attorneys scrambled, citing business complexity, but it was clear the judge was not convinced. For the first time, Rebecca saw it, the crack in Daniel's armor. Fear just a flicker, but unmistakable. And it filled her with a surge of strength she hadn't felt in months. The battle had begun, and this time Rebecca was no longer alone, no longer powerless. The judge's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the documents laid before her. "Explain these offshore accounts," she said sharply, turning her gaze to Daniel's lead attorney. the man stammered. These accounts were established for standard real estate structuring, entirely legal. I assure you, we're prepared to submit further clarification. Joanna stood again. With all due respect. Your Honor, we believe these so-called structures were deliberately designed to obscure assets during marital separation. We also have reason to believe Mr. Martin was transferring properties and liquidating holdings to avoid equitable distribution. Rebecca sat upright, trying to remain still, despite the adrenaline pounding through her. The judge called for a recess. Both parties were instructed to meet in a conference room for private negotiation under judicial supervision. In the room, tension ran thick. Daniel avoided Rebecca's eyes. His lawyers huddled, whispering urgently. Joanna leaned over and whispered to Rebecca, "This is our chance. Stay firm." Suddenly, Daniel leaned forward across the polished conference table. "You think this is some kind of victory?" he hissed under his breath. "You don't know the circles I move in. One leak to the wrong person," and Rebecca cut him off her voice. "Cool, try it, I've got a baby coming. Daniel, I don't scare easily anymore." Joanna, unfazed, began laying out settlement conditions. "We want full custody, child support indexed to Daniel's future income, spousal support and housing in Rebecca's name, non-disparagement and child privacy clauses, all enforceable." Daniel's lawyers balked. "This is absurd. Not as absurd as your client laundering funds through companies registered to his mistress." Joanna replied, folding her arms. "You really want this in front of a federal prosecutor?" The room fell silent. Daniel's lead counsel pulled him aside. Their murmurs grew heated. Rebecca watched Daniel's face twist in frustration. Finally, the lawyers returned to the table. "We're willing to discuss terms." Rebecca exhaled slowly. The leverage they'd built, painful, complicated, earned with sleepless nights and buried pride, was finally working. Still, it wasn't just about money. She leaned in. "I want to raise my daughter without looking over my shoulder. You'll stay out of our lives. No more games, or I go to the press and to the authorities." Daniel's silence was telling. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time, Rebecca saw him not as the man who had shattered her life, but as a man scrambling to salvage what remained of his empire. Daniel's fury simmered beneath the surface. His lips curled as he glared at Joanna. "You're all bluffing," he muttered. Joanna didn't flinch. "Then let's take it to the judge. I'm sure federal prosecutors will be delighted to see our packet." Daniel's attorneys spoke over him. Now urgency overtaking arrogance. "Yes, Martin, this is no longer about pride. It's about minimizing damage. Let's not escalate this further." Rebecca watched Daniel's jaw clench, his eyes, darting toward her belly, then away. He was cornered, and he knew it. With a bitter scoff, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Within minutes, his attorneys returned. The scribbling began. Pages of revised terms were passed back and forth, each item negotiated with precision. Joanna didn't let up for a second. At last, a new agreement was drafted. Rebecca would receive a 7-figure settlement, separate from child support. She would gain full legal and physical custody, while Daniel would be allowed supervised visitation pending psychological evaluation. The suburban house would be placed fully in Rebecca's name. A strict non-disclosure and privacy clause would protect both mother and child. Joanna reviewed every line before turning to Rebecca. "This protects you and your daughter. It's a solid win." Rebecca felt a strange numbness as she signed. This wasn't the happy ending she once imagined, but it was freedom. Her child would never have to beg for her father's love or wonder why her mother cried alone in the dark afterward. Joanna reached across the table and squeezed Rebecca's hand. "You did this. You didn't back down. But the day wasn't over. As they stepped out of the courtroom, Vanessa stood waiting near the steps, holding a thick envelope in her hands. She looked tired but resolute. "I filed my lawsuit," she said quietly. "Fraud, forgery, emotional distress. And I'm cooperating with the feds." Rebecca blinked, stunned. "You're really doing it." Vanessa nodded. "He used me too. It's time someone uses him as an example." Rebecca didn't smile, but she nodded. For once, she and Vanessa were no longer enemies, just two women who had survived the same man. And now, together or apart, they were finally turning the tables, while the court was still processing the settlement for Rebecca. Vanessa, with guidance from her own attorney, filed a separate civil suit. She accused Daniel of forging her signature on official documents, thereby implicating her in illicit financial activities without her consent. Her lawsuit demanded significant damages for emotional distress and the potential professional fallout she could face if the documents ever went public. News of Vanessa's lawsuit spread rapidly through legal and business circles. Suddenly, Daniel found himself in a precarious position. Not only had he been forced to grant a large divorce settlement to Rebecca, but now his mistress-turned-adversary was dragging him back into court. Corporate partners began distancing themselves. Rumors circulated that a federal investigation into money laundering might be imminent. As for Rebecca, the day she signed the final divorce settlement was both heartbreaking and liberating. It was an end to her marriage, but a new beginning for her and her child. Though it stung to see Daniel's name in the papers day after day, her priority remained her pregnancy and the peace she had fought so hard to secure. A part of her felt a twinge of satisfaction that the mistress who had once stolen her husband was now on a path to bring him to his knees. Throughout February, as Rebecca neared her due date, she focused on creating a home for her baby. True to the settlement terms, Daniel provided a well-furnished suburban house, modest by his standards, but comfortable and safe. Sarah Patterson helped decorate the nursery, filling it with soft blankets, pastel art, and a gentle mobile that played lullabies. Meanwhile, Daniel's once glossy reputation was in shambles. He was embroiled in Vanessa's lawsuit, facing potential criminal charges for financial malpractice, and watching his business deals crumble. Despite it all, he tried to save face, issuing press statements that downplayed the severity of the allegations. But the damage was done. His name was now synonymous with scandal. On a crisp morning in early March, Rebecca felt her first contractions. Sarah rushed her to the hospital. 14 hours of labor later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Amelia Holding. Amelia in her arms. Rebecca wept tears of joy and relief. She vowed that this tiny, precious life would never be shadowed by greed or betrayal. This was her fresh start, her clean break from a past rife with pain. Yet even from the hospital bed, a part of her wondered, had Daniel truly lost everything he cared about? While Rebecca settled into new motherhood, carefully nursing baby Amelia through long nights and early mornings, a storm raged outside her quiet suburban home. A storm that had Daniel Martin's name at its center. For weeks, Vanessa's legal team had been in close contact with federal prosecutors, building a case, brick by damning brick. What began as a civil suit for fraud and emotional distress had evolved into something much bigger. Vanessa had turned over everything: emails, spreadsheets, bank statements, and most crucially, recordings. One of the audio files included Daniel's voice casually discussing how to move the money around through a Luxembourg account to avoid U.S. tax oversight. Another revealed him bragging to a colleague over drinks about a politician who owed him favors in exchange for generous campaign support. These weren't just the careless words of an arrogant man. They were potential evidence of serious federal crimes. Rebecca first heard about the indictments, not from her lawyer, but on the morning news breaking Manhattan real estate mogul Daniel Martin under federal investigation. The anchor announced, eyes wide. Sources close to the case confirm charges related to money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Rebecca stood frozen in the kitchen, a bottle in one hand, Amelia cradled in the other. More headlines followed by noon. FBI freezes, assets, linked to Martin Development Group. Vanessa Moore. Files. Lawsuit against former lover alleges. Financial forgery. Daniel Martins. Companies under federal scrutiny. Possible. Political fallout. The fall was swift and brutal. Daniel's luxury lifestyle unraveled overnight. Federal agents issued warrants to seize luxury cars and freeze offshore accounts. His private jet share was suspended. His name was stripped from development projects, and investor partnerships collapsed like dominoes. Paparazzi staked out the courthouse steps, snapping photos as Daniel, now pale and drawn, attempted to shield himself behind a briefcase and dark sunglasses. His $1,000 suit no longer carried its usual swagger. Rebecca watched the media circus with a strange mixture of detachment and disbelief. The man who once held her financial future in his clenched fists was now pleading with lawyers, dodging cameras, and facing a criminal indictment that could carry decades of prison time. Joanna called that evening. "He's done," she said. Vanessa's cooperation was the nail in the coffin. They may try to negotiate a plea deal. But this isn't going away. Rebecca hung up and walked to the nursery. Amelia was sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Rebecca stroked her daughter's cheek and whispered, "We're safe now." She didn't feel joy, just a calm, steady closure. The war was over. Daniel Martin had spent years building an empire on charm manipulation and lies. But it only took the combined courage of two women and the truth to bring it all crumbling down. And though Rebecca would never forget the pain he caused, she no longer feared his shadow. She had faced the worst and emerged stronger, freer, and no longer alone. The outcome of Vanessa's civil suit was equally spectacular. Faced with an avalanche of incriminating evidence, Daniel's legal team scrambled to settle out of court. They agreed to pay Vanessa a significant sum, an amount rumored to exceed millions, to avoid further public humiliation. By the time the dust settled, Daniel's resources were so drained that he barely resembled the once untouchable mogul who had cast Rebecca aside. Meanwhile, Rebecca grew stronger each day. She immersed herself in motherhood, nursing Amelia through sleepless nights, and savoring every milestone, from the first gurgle to the first hint of a smile. Financially stable, thanks to her divorce settlement, she was able to hire a part-time nanny, so she could also take care of her own health and eventually return to part-time work. Her phone rang occasionally with reporters seeking her side of the story, but she declined every interview. She wanted no part in the media circus. Her focus remained on building a peaceful life for Amelia. She had faced her dragons in court, won her battles, and now yearned only for normalcy. Still, every now and then she'd catch a flash of Daniel's downfall in the headlines: disgraced tycoon mansion, seized by FBI ex-wife, and ex-mistress deliver crushing blows. It was a reminder of how far she'd come. Months passed. Spring melted into a warm summer, and Amelia blossomed into a curious, bright-eyed infant. Rebecca watched her daughter reach for shiny toys, giggle at the sunlight filtering through the curtains, and gaze with innocent wonder at the world around her. Each moment reaffirmed that she had made the right decisions, even if those choices were forced upon her by Daniel's betrayal. In a final legal proceeding, Daniel pleaded guilty to several counts of financial fraud to reduce his sentence. He received a prison term that ensured he'd be away for years to come. Despite the bitter taste of it all, Rebecca felt no triumph in hearing the news, only a resigned sadness that Daniel had chosen such a destructive path. Vanessa, after receiving her settlement, left the city to start anew in another state. She sent Rebecca an email, once a simple apology, alongside a wish that both she and Amelia found happiness. Rebecca never replied, though she did silently acknowledge Vanessa's role in exposing Daniel's crimes. Standing on the porch of her suburban home one sunny afternoon, Rebecca cradled Amelia. She gazed at the baby's tiny fingers wrapped around her own. In that quiet instant, she felt a wave of gratitude. Life could be painful, but it could also be astonishingly beautiful. She was no longer the homeless, pregnant wife of a millionaire. She was a mother, a survivor, and the architect of her own destiny. Rebecca's journey from a betrayed wife left with nothing to a resilient mother, determined to protect her child, reminds us that true strength can rise from the harshest betrayals. Her unwavering resolve, combined with an unlikely alliance with the very mistress who had upended her marriage, brought a man of immense power to his knees. Ultimately, Daniel lost the glittering empire he'd built on deceit, and both the women he wronged secured justice in their own ways. If this story of heartbreak, betrayal, and redemption moved you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. Your support enables us to continue bringing powerful real-life drama and fiction to the screen. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss another story that might inspire or empower you. Together, let's celebrate the courage it takes to stand up for what's right, no matter how powerful the opposition may seem.
Divorced for 7 years, Millionaire discovers his divorced ex-wife secretly had twins. He's in shock. A cryptic late-night phone call, a decades-old family feud, a set of dusty photos found in an attic. These are the threads that unravel the tightly woven secret around James Harrington, an ambitious millionaire with a heart of stone. Or so they say. 7 years ago, he divorced Victoria under mysterious, painful circumstances. He left everything behind, believing he could forge a new life devoid of heartbreak or regret. But when a brief encounter shakes him to the core, James discovers that Victoria has been harboring a life-altering secret, not just one child, but twins, his twins. The shocking revelation sets the stage for a roller coaster of betrayal, love, and redemption. Below is a dramatic, fictionalized account filled with twists, turns, and heart-stopping moments. Any resemblance to real individuals is entirely coincidental. Enjoy this story told in novel form. James Harrington was never a man to dwell on the past. At 35, he was the head of a software empire that he'd built from the ground up, Harrington Innovations. His life, meticulously scheduled, revolved around business meetings, high-stakes negotiations, and lavish galas in New York's most exclusive circles. He knew how to charm an audience, how to close deals, how to get the best out of people until the day he'd met Victoria Lambert. They had met at a charity ball in Manhattan 8 years ago. Victoria, then a struggling artist, had impressed him with her wit and resilience. She didn't fawn over him like the other women he'd encountered. Instead, she teased him about his tie, which she claimed clashed with his suit, and from that moment on, James was hooked. Their courtship was swift, intense, and fueled by shared dreams and whispered promises. A year later, they were married under the starlight in an extravagant ceremony at the Harrington estate. Everyone thought it was a match made in heaven. The ambitious millionaire and the talented, spirited artist who brought color to his otherwise monochrome life. But behind the carefully curated front, cracks began to form. James's board members at Harrington Innovations constantly whispered that Victoria was a distraction. She was too idealistic, too bohemian for the cutthroat world of corporate success. Meanwhile, Victoria, tired of living under a microscope, complained of feeling suffocated by James's controlling nature and the constant media attention. The final straw came when James, under immense pressure from his board, agreed to move their base of operations to London. It wasn't the move itself that ended the marriage. Victoria liked the adventure of new places. It was the secretive dealings and personal betrayals that came with it. Old resentments clashed, dark words were exchanged. Before they knew it, they were in the midst of a divorce that left them both irreparably scarred. They severed ties, or so James believed. For 7 years, he heard almost nothing of Victoria, but a single phone call during a late night of restless insomnia changed everything. "James," came the trembling voice on the other end. "It's Elizabeth Davis, Victoria's aunt. I think you should see some pictures I found." Pictures. The conversation was brief and cryptic. Elizabeth wouldn't say more. She simply insisted James come to her house in Brooklyn. That was how James found himself, a day later, staring at a small stack of photographs in Elizabeth's living room photos that made his heart jolt. Standing beside Victoria in these images were 2 children twins who looked unmistakably like him. Elizabeth Davis, Victoria's maternal aunt, had always been a kind but no-nonsense woman. She had run her own bakery, Davis Delights, in the heart of Brooklyn for over 30 years. She'd witnessed family feuds and reconciliations, births and deaths, heartbreak and triumphs. With her silver-streaked hair and watchful gaze, she seemed to carry the sorrow of the entire Davis clan in her eyes. When James arrived at her home, Elizabeth wasted no time. She beckoned him to an old coffee table and placed before him a small envelope, battered and stained. "Open it," she said, her voice thick with concern. Inside were nearly a dozen photos. The first few featured Victoria in a quaint suburban house, smiling. Then came a photo of Victoria cradling a baby boy. Another shot a toddler boy and a toddler girl, each holding Victoria's hand. Elizabeth watched James carefully, gauging his reaction. James felt his pulse hammering in his temples. The boy had hair that mirrored James's chestnut color and eyes shaped uncannily like his father's. The girl had the same dimple James saw in the mirror when he offered the world his trademark lopsided grin. He swallowed hard. "How old are they?" he finally managed, fighting to keep his voice steady. "They'll turn 7 next month," Elizabeth responded, her hand trembling as she poured tea into 2 mismatched cups. Victoria named them Noah and Lily. 7. The timeline lined up perfectly with the tail end of his marriage. Shockwaves reverberated through James's body. Why had Victoria kept this from him? How had she managed to hide not 1 but 2 children? Elizabeth explained she had stumbled upon the photos when cleaning out old family albums. Victoria had insisted on secrecy. The rest of the family had obeyed, partly out of loyalty and partly due to a complicated set of circumstances. Victoria had insisted they wouldn't understand. "I'm telling you now," Elizabeth said, "because I believe you have the right to know. They're your children, James." The walls of the living room pressed in on James, and the floral couch beneath him felt unsteady. Memories flooded back Victoria's tears during their final arguments, her pleas for him to listen, his own blindness to what she might have been going through. He lifted his gaze to meet Elizabeth's. "Where is she? Where are they now?" Victoria moved to a small town outside Boston, near her friend Sarah Carter's place, Elizabeth said. She didn't want to remain in New York after everything. James inhaled shakily, the reality of fatherhood settling into his bones. In that moment, he realized life as he knew it was about to change forever. He wasn't just a self-made millionaire with an empire to run. He was a father of twins. Leaving Elizabeth's townhouse, James felt a weight drop onto his shoulders. Rage and hurt mingled with curiosity and tenderness. Victoria had robbed him of 7 years he could have had with his children. How could she justify that? He wanted answers. The next day, after a sleepless night filled with replayed memories, James instructed his personal assistant, Caroline Wu, to rearrange his schedule. He needed to go to Boston immediately. Caroline, ever efficient, asked no questions. She had seen James distressed only once before, during his messy divorce. But she recognized that this crisis, though personal, surpassed every other obligation. Armed with the address Elizabeth had hesitantly provided, James found himself driving through a peaceful suburb outside Boston the following afternoon. Green lawns stretched in neat rows, and porch swings swayed gently in the breeze. The house in question was a modest, pale blue cottage, adorned with a small garden of daisies and sunflowers. If James hadn't been so emotionally tormented, he might have found it charming. He parked his sleek BMW in the driveway and stepped out. For a long moment, he simply stood there, scanning every detail: the white picket fence, the welcome mat that read, "Home Sweet Home," the child-sized bicycles leaning against the garage. No butler answered the door here. No press cameras lurked around. This was far from the glitzy world he inhabited. His knock sounded abnormally loud. When the door opened, the woman standing behind it was not Victoria, but a petite brunette with a kind face. She wore a paint-splattered apron and carried a brush in one hand. "Can I help you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "My name is James Harrington," he began, his voice betraying his anxiety. "I'm looking for Victoria Lambert. Or Harrington, rather." The woman's face paled. "I'm Sarah Carter," she said, her voice strained. "Victoria's friend." She hesitated a moment, then sighed. "I suppose you should come in." Inside, the living room smelled of fresh paint. Canvases were stacked against the wall, beautiful landscapes, cityscapes, and a few abstract pieces. James recognized Victoria's style instantly: bold strokes, vibrant colors. Despite the tension in his chest, a flicker of pride surfaced. She was painting again. James swallowed. "I need to see her." "I've just found out that you have children," Sarah interrupted, her expression softening slightly. "She's been trying to protect them." She was afraid. James's voice cracked. "Afraid of what?" "Me?" Sarah offered him a sad smile. "There are many reasons, James. I think you should hear it from Victoria herself." As if on cue, footsteps approached from a hallway. James's heart pounded, bracing himself for the first face-to-face encounter with the woman who'd carried his children without his knowledge for 7 years. Or was it truly without his knowledge, or had he simply refused to see the signs? Victoria stood in the hallway, her eyes wide with shock. She looked different from how James remembered: thinner, paler, and with faint lines of worry etched around her eyes. But she was still strikingly beautiful, her raven black hair cascading over her shoulders. In her hand, she clutched a half-finished drawing of a swirling sunset, pastel crayons smudged on her fingers. For a moment, neither spoke. They seemed trapped in that silent hallway, 7 years' worth of unspoken confessions and suppressed pain threatening to burst. Finally, Victoria cleared her throat. "James, why are you here?" Her voice trembled, yet retained a note of defiance. James stepped closer, an overwhelming mix of anger and hurt flashing across his face. "Why do you think I'm here?" he demanded, keeping his voice as calm as possible. "I found out about Noah and Lily." Sarah discreetly retreated to the kitchen, leaving them alone. The color drained from Victoria's face. She forced herself to stand taller, meeting his gaze. "I never planned on you finding out like this." "Then how did you plan on me finding out?" James shot back, voice rising. Or were you never going to tell me I'm a father? She swallowed. The tension in the air crackled. It's not that simple, she finally said. I had reasons. We were toxic, James. Our fights, your corporate ambitions. I didn't want my children used as pawns in your business world. And you, James cut her off, his eyes brimming with betrayal. You think I'd use my own children as pawns? You always believed the worst of me, Victoria. She stared at the floor, recalling bitter arguments from their marriage. I tried to tell you I was pregnant, but you were already halfway out the door, she whispered. Every time I tried to approach you, your lawyers would intercept. It all happened so fast. Our divorce was finalized even before I could gather the courage to face you. His anger faltered for a moment, replaced by confusion and regret. Could he have truly missed the signs? Looking back, he remembered the days she'd been ill, her frustration at his endless trips. Perhaps she hadn't been exaggerating or simply distressed. Maybe she was trying to tell him something all along. Victoria continued, her voice breaking. I was scared, James. I was alone. I came here to live quietly and raise Noah and Lily away from the Harrington name, away from scandal, from your ruthless associates. I didn't want them to be pawns in your father's legacy. Don't you see? He closed his eyes. Memories of board meetings, corporate maneuverings, and a father who had always demanded James surpass every expectation flooded him. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong to be cautious, but still, she robbed him of precious years with his children. He opened his eyes, tears threatening to surface. I'm here now, he whispered, voice raw. And they're my children, Victoria. I have a right to know them. The next hour slipped by in a tense haze of half-spoken truths and painful explanations. Sarah hovered in the background, offering tea and a sympathetic ear. Victoria and James danced around each other like two wary animals trying to figure out if the other posed a threat. Eventually, the door creaked open. Two small voices echoed in the hallway. Mum, we're back! A pair of exuberant twins, a boy and a girl, raced into the living room, backpacks swinging wildly. As soon as they spotted James, they froze. The girl was the first to speak. Mum, who's that? She was a whirlwind of energy, with wide hazel eyes and a smile that could melt steel. Her hair was styled in two adorable braids, ribbons fluttering as she moved. Lily, Noah, quieter, hung back, observing James with a hesitant curiosity. He had the same wary spark in his eyes James recognized from his own reflection when he was uncertain. James's heart constricted at the sight. Victoria gently ushered the children closer. She knelt down to their eye level, taking a deep breath. James noticed the tremor in her hands. Noah, Lily, she began softly, this is James Harrington. He's someone from my past. James's pulse hammered. He wanted to shout, I'm your father, but forced himself to remain still. He didn't want to traumatize them. They deserved to be eased into the truth. Lily blinked, tugging on her mother's sleeve. Is he that famous businessman? She whispered, eyes bright with curiosity. The one who invented that phone app that helps with, yeah, that's me, James replied, kneeling as well, trying to make himself smaller, less intimidating. I, work in technology. Noah just stared. Finally he spoke, voice measured. Why are you in our house? The child's gaze made James want to crumble. He had no idea how to respond. He glanced helplessly at Victoria, who found the courage to speak. He came to visit, she said gently. We have a lot to talk about, kids. Unsure what to do, James reached into his pocket. He'd picked up 2 sets of color pencils and sketchbooks from a local art store on the way, remembering how Victoria had always cherished art supplies. I brought these for you both, he stammered. Lily's eyes lit up. She practically danced over, taking the gift with excitement. Noah approached more cautiously, but he took the sketchbook, flipping through its blank pages with a growing flicker of interest. In that moment, James realized his children had a spark of creativity, perhaps passed on from both parents. Even as Lily giggled at the new set of pencils, a hush hung over the air. Everyone knew a greater conversation lay ahead. The children might not understand now, but soon enough the truth would come to light, altering their peaceful world forever. That evening, Victoria asked James to leave before dinner, giving the children space to process his unexpected appearance. Though he longed to stay, James respected her request and returned to a nearby boutique hotel. However, the cozy decor and the crisp white sheets did nothing to calm his mind. Sleep refused him. He tossed and turned, replaying the day's events over and over. The next morning, he received a text from Victoria, "We need to talk. Meet me at Sarah's place at noon." A swirl of relief and anxiety washed over him. This was a chance to sit down without the twins eavesdropping. Maybe they could sort out a plan, if such a thing were possible, after so many years of distrust. Before leaving, James called Caroline in New York and asked her to clear his schedule for the next week. He needed time. If his board members complained, he would handle that later. Right now, this took precedence. He was father first, CEO second. When James arrived back at the cottage, he found Victoria and Sarah in the kitchen, cups of coffee in hand. The twins were at school, so the house was quiet. Every nerve in James's body felt electrified, anticipating the confrontation. Sarah excused herself to give them privacy, disappearing into her study. Victoria gestured for James to sit at the small wooden dining table. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the wind chimes, providing a serene backdrop to the turmoil within. Victoria sighed. "We need to figure out how to handle this. I never wanted to keep them away from you forever, despite what it must look like. But you have to understand, I feared you'd gain custody or use your influence to overshadow their childhood." James swallowed his resentment. "I understand you had your reasons, even if I don't agree with them, but they're my children, Victoria. I want to be part of their lives. I missed 7 years already, and I won't miss any more." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know, that's why I'm here, talking to you. But they're not used to having a father. They only know me. And some friends like Sarah. Suddenly introducing you as their dad would be a shock." James ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. "So what do? We take this slowly," Victoria said. "Noah and Lily need time to trust you. I think you should spend time with them supervised at first until they get comfortable. You must promise not to push them." He wanted to protest, but knew she was right. A forced relationship could backfire, adding more chaos to their young lives. "All right," he conceded. "Supervised visits at first. But what about the future? Are you planning to stay here indefinitely?" Victoria shrugged, her gaze drifting to the window. "This cottage is our home now. The kids have friends, a routine. Uprooting them for the hustle of New York or the glare of media attention, that terrifies me." James nodded, realizing that forging a life with his newly discovered children would require more compromise than he was used to. Uncharted territory lay before them, riddled with tension, but also the flicker of a second chance. A week passed in a blur of tentative introductions. James spent afternoons at the cottage, under Victoria's watchful eye, slowly inching his way into Noah and Lily's day-to-day routine. He was careful not to intrude too forcefully, mindful of Victoria's protective stance. Surprisingly, Sarah offered an unexpected source of support. She would often take Lily or Noah aside, gently explaining that James was a friend who cared about them and wanted to know them better. Art became James's secret weapon. Having discovered how much the twins loved to draw, he brought them fresh supplies, colored pens, watercolors, and even a digital drawing tablet. Lily shrieked with delight over the tablet's features, eagerly testing out new brushes and color palettes. Noah, more subdued, nonetheless showed a quiet fascination in rendering lifelike portraits of the family's cat, Pepper. Day by day, the tension in the household softened. Lily began asking James endless questions about his life in New York, about the technology behind the tablet, and if it was true that he once met the mayor. Noah was still hesitant he would hang back, observing, but occasionally James caught glimpses of the boy's curiosity when Noah asked about coding or how phone apps were made. One afternoon, while Lily was engrossed in painting with Sarah, James found Noah alone in the backyard, tinkering with a small wooden project. The boy seemed focused, brows knitted in concentration. "Need any help?" James ventured, careful not to loom too close. Noah shrugged. "I'm building a birdhouse for Mum's birthday." James crouched down, trying to find the right tone. "That's pretty cool. Where'd you learn to do this?" "Sarah showed me how. She's good with tools," Noah replied, glancing up. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward James. "Is it hard to make a big building like a skyscraper? Like the Harrington Tower in New York?" James's breath caught, so the boy knew of his achievements. "Well, I didn't build it myself," he admitted with a smile. "I worked with a lot of architects and engineers, but it's not easy. It takes planning, teamwork, and patience." Noah nodded slowly, digesting the information. There was a long pause before the boy spoke again. "Mum said, 'You're a busy man.'" James exhaled. "I am, but I'm trying to make time for important things now." He mustered a kind smile. "And this birdhouse looks important. Do you mind if I help? Maybe I can hold the pieces while you nail them." For a moment, Noah studied James warily, but then the boy nodded, silently offering James a small hammer. That simple gesture felt like a monumental victory. Building that tiny birdhouse, side by side, was the first time James felt like a father. While James was slowly earning trust from Noah and Lily, ghosts from his past began resurfacing. News of his absence from Harrington Innovations fueled rumors among board members and investors alike. Caroline called him daily with urgent updates. The company's stock had dipped slightly, and an opportunistic rival, Maxwell Cunningham, was swooping in on a crucial deal. "James, you have to come back," Caroline insisted on one call. "We're losing ground in the European market, and Maxwell is capitalizing on your absence." James gritted his teeth. He had worked so hard to expand internationally, forging relationships in London, Berlin, and Amsterdam. "I'll schedule a conference call tomorrow," he promised. "But, Caroline, I can't just leave right now." His personal life was at a tipping point. Any abrupt move might shatter the fragile bond forming with his children. Yet ignoring his corporate responsibilities risked everything he'd built. He felt torn, simultaneously wanting to protect his empire and cultivate the newfound relationship that truly mattered. Adding to the tension, an unexpected visitor arrived one evening, George Harrington, James's father. A formidable figure in the business world, George had once guided James's early ventures with an iron fist, demanding perfection. Their relationship was complex, marred by an undercurrent of fierce pride and constant disapproval. James was just stepping out of the cottage after a day with the twins when he saw the Harrington family chauffeur-driven sedan pull up. George emerged, dressed in a tailored suit, hair silvered with age but posture still commanding. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling like static electricity. "Son," George said by way of greeting. His gaze flicked around the unassuming neighborhood with thinly veiled distaste. "What on earth are you doing here? Do you realize your absence is causing chaos at the company? Maxwell Cunningham is picking off our clients like a vulture." James bristled, crossing his arms. "I'm aware, but there are more important things at stake right now." George's eyes narrowed. "More important than safeguarding the Harrington name and fortune. Have you lost your mind?" James clenched his jaw. "I found out I have children, Dad, twins." Victoria kept them from me. I'm doing what's right by them now. George's stiff demeanor faltered for a moment. He blinked in shock. What are you talking about? Victoria has children? Are you sure they're yours? The insinuation stung. They are, no doubt about it, James snapped. George exhaled, struggling to compose himself. I had no idea. But James, your responsibilities don't vanish just because you discovered new ones. The Harrington Empire needs you. Don't let this woman and her children derail everything. James felt a spark of anger. They are my children, Dad, and I won't abandon them for the sake of stock prices. George opened his mouth to retort, but was interrupted as the cottage door swung open. Victoria stood there, confusion and apprehension etched across her face. She recognized George instantly. It was impossible to forget the stern patriarch who had once loomed large over James's life. In that moment, James realized his worlds, his father, and his new family were colliding, and he dreaded the fallout that was sure to follow. George Harrington's arrival introduced a new tension into the budding family dynamic. When Victoria saw him standing in the front yard with James, her spine stiffened. She recalled their brief encounters during her marriage, always formal, always charged with unspoken disapproval. George had never openly insulted her, but his condescension dripped from every measured word and unyielding stare. "Good evening, Victoria," George greeted with a stiff inclination of his head. "I heard about the children. Congratulations." His tone suggested he wasn't exactly congratulating anyone. Victoria nodded warily. "Thank you. They're inside, but I would rather they not be around for this conversation." George's lips thinned. "Very well." He turned his attention to James, who was standing protectively at Victoria's side. "Son, I came to take you back to New York. The company is in jeopardy. You've done your fatherly duty by showing up here. Let's not overcomplicate things." James felt a flash of indignation. "They are not an obligation I can check off my list. I plan to be involved, Dad, day by day." Victoria's gaze flicked between them, old anxieties resurfacing. She spoke quietly but firmly. "We are trying to do what's best for Noah and Lily, Mr. Harrington. A rapid change to your fast-paced world would be overwhelming. They're just children." George's response was swift. "I respect your maternal instincts, but James has a legacy to uphold. If you truly care about the children's future, you'll realize that they stand to inherit a considerable fortune, one that shouldn't be jeopardized by a few months of father-son bonding in a random Boston suburb." An icy dread trickled down Victoria's spine. She knew that tone, that unyielding sense of entitlement that the Harrington family exuded. Suddenly, she imagined the future, boardrooms full of corporate sharks eyeing her children like pawns. The very scenario she had tried to avoid for 7 years. Yet, James was different, wasn't he? James inhaled deeply, placing a steady hand on Victoria's shoulder. "Dad, your perspective is outdated. I've run Harrington Innovations for years. I've balanced expansions, acquisitions, philanthropic endeavors. I can manage fatherhood too. I'm not leaving until I'm sure the twins are comfortable with me. And if that means Maxwell Cunningham gets ahead temporarily, so be it." George's eyes hardened. "You can't let sentimentality ruin everything you've built. There's more at stake than your personal guilt. I came here to tell you, if you don't return soon, the board may consider ousting you as CEO temporarily or otherwise." Victoria felt James's muscles tense at her side. She knew how much his company meant to him. He had poured his soul into that empire. But now, she saw in his eyes that fatherhood had quietly become just as important, perhaps even more. Faced with his father's ultimatum, James stood at a crossroads. That night, James sat alone in his hotel room, staring at his laptop screen, an empty whiskey glass at his side. His email inbox overflowed with urgent pleas from board members and countless messages from investors anxious about his absence. The threat from Maxwell Cunningham grew more pressing by the day. Meanwhile, George Harrington had retreated to a penthouse suite downtown, expecting James to come to his senses. But James couldn't forget the startled joy in Noah's eyes that afternoon when they finished the birdhouse together, or the squeals of laughter from Lily when James had accidentally splashed paint on his shirt during an art session. These little moments felt more fulfilling than any corporate victory. Yet the weight of his empire loomed large. Could he truly have both? When he finally closed his laptop, the time was nearly midnight. Still, he ventured out, driving through the quiet suburban streets until he found himself at Victoria's cottage. The windows were mostly dark, but a soft glow illuminated the living room. He knocked gently, hoping not to wake the children. Victoria opened the door, surprise etched across her features. "James?" "It's late." His shoulders sagged. "I'm sorry, I needed someone to talk to." She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered the dim living room, noticing the flickering of a single lamp and the faint smell of paint thinner. A half-finished canvas leaned against an easel, swirls of turquoise and peach dancing across it. He sighed, sinking onto the sofa. "My father's pressuring me to go back. The board's up in arms. I might lose the company if I don't return soon." Victoria's expression softened. "That company is your life, James. I know it's not easy to turn your back on it." He ran a hand through his hair. "It was my life. But now there's more. Every time I see Lily and Noah, I realize what I've been missing." She settled beside him, carefully measuring her words. "I'm not standing in your way. I know how important Harrington Innovations is to you, but the children need consistency. If you vanish for weeks at a time, popping in and out, that might hurt them more." He locked eyes with her. "Then come to New York." Victoria's eyes widened. "We just got done talking about how the city, the media, the corporate environment might harm the kids. That's why I moved here in the first place. I'm not sure if I can uproot them." James leaned forward, elbows on his knees, feeling the magnitude of the dilemma. "I don't want to rip them out of their home. But I also can't abandon my company. It's not just about money, it's about the people who work there, the philanthropic programs we sponsor. If I'm forced out, Maxwell will unravel everything I've built." Silence stretched. Then Victoria placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. The contact, gentle yet meaningful, reminded them of a time before all the bitterness. "We'll figure something out," she whispered. "Maybe we can find a compromise." In the hush of the late-night glow, the two former spouses found a fragile truce, united by the shared love for their children and the knowledge that something bigger than themselves was at stake. The following morning, Victoria awoke with the seed of an idea taking root in her mind. She made fresh coffee, her thoughts swirling. What if they tried a temporary move to New York, just for a short while, to test the waters? She hated the idea of returning to the city that had once been the stage for her heartbreak, but it might give James time to stabilize Harrington Innovations and allow him to be with the twins. When James arrived, later that day, still looking drained, Victoria cleared her throat. "I have a proposal," she began, bracing herself for the conversation. "I've been thinking. The kids have summer break coming up in 2 months. We could come to New York for that period. It would let you manage the company without leaving them behind." James's eyes lit with cautious hope. "You'd do that?" Victoria nodded. "On one condition, we keep it as low profile as possible. No big press releases, no paparazzi. I don't want the kids thrust into the media spotlight. Also, you have to arrange a stable routine for them, school or day camp, extracurricular activities, a safe living environment." James exhaled, relief battling with anxiety. "I can do that. I'll buy or rent a place in a quieter neighborhood away from Midtown, something family-friendly. We'll keep them off the tabloids. Victoria bit her lip, memories of tabloid headlines flickering. And your father? Will he respect boundaries? I don't want him interfering or challenging every decision I make for the kids. A shadow passed across James's face. I'll make it clear he has no say in how we raise them. This is between you, me, and the twins. She nodded, wanting to believe him. All right, then let's start planning. We have time to prep the kids for a temporary stay in New York, and if it feels wrong or the kids hate it, we'll come back immediately. James mustered a small smile. Thank you, Victoria. I know this is a big step. We'll make it work. They spent the rest of the morning making a list of tasks, find suitable housing, research summer programs for the twins, discuss logistics with the local school so the kids could return after break without issues, coordinate with Harrington Innovations to reduce media exposure. For a moment it felt like they were a team again, though the scars of the past still lingered, overshadowing every conversation. A glimmer of hope emerged. When Noah and Lily returned from school, James awkwardly tried to explain that they might spend part of the summer in New York. Lily bounced in excitement at the prospect of city lights and museums. Noah, on the other hand, looked uncertain but listened quietly, eventually nodding. It was a small but positive sign. None of them knew just how tumultuous the next phase of their lives would become once they returned to the city that had shaped and broken their family. 2 months later, the Harrington private jet taxied on a runway at a small, discreet airfield just outside Manhattan. James had insisted on traveling this way to keep the children out of the public eye. Victoria, holding Lily's hand, looked around with apprehension. She felt the city's pulse, even from here. Noah stood close, holding his sketchbook. They were met by Caroline Wu, who greeted the twins with a warm smile and handed them small welcome gifts, NYC-themed coloring books. Then a black SUV whisked them away to a townhouse James had rented on the Upper West Side, near Central Park. It was far from the bustling corporate heart of Midtown and offered a bit more privacy. The 4-story home had plenty of space. Each child had their own bedroom. There was a courtyard garden and an art room prepared especially for Victoria, stocked with supplies. The twins, eyes widening at the sight of the grand staircase, scampered inside, exploring every nook. Lily giggled when she discovered a swing in the private courtyard, and Noah marveled at the high-tech security system. Victoria took a deep breath. It was an opulent environment, far removed from their cozy Boston cottage. She prayed it wouldn't overwhelm the children. Within days, James found himself juggling fatherhood and corporate chaos. At Harrington Innovations, he was met by uneasy board members who demanded explanations for his prolonged absence. Maxwell Cunningham had maneuvered behind the scenes, sowing doubt about James's leadership. It took all of James's diplomatic skill and strategic thinking to stave off a coup. Slowly, he managed to regain the board's confidence by unveiling a new plan for expansion that included improved employee benefits and philanthropic endeavors in education ideas he'd brainstormed while reflecting on fatherhood. In the evenings, James hurried home to have dinner with the twins and Victoria. He listened eagerly to Lily's stories about the day camp near Central Park and answered Noah's endless questions about programming and design. The boy had even started tinkering with basic coding tutorials on a tablet James gave him. Meanwhile, Victoria adapted to the city's pulse, though warily. She found a small studio in a local art collective to work on her paintings during the day, dropping by the townhouse to check on the kids in between. But not all was smooth sailing. Paparazzi still lurked occasionally, snapping photos whenever James left the office. Social media speculated about the identity of the 2 children seen with him. Rumors swirled that they might be nieces or some philanthropic involvement. The Harrington PR team kept a tight lid on the truth for now. And then there was George Harrington. True to his word, James kept him at arm's length when it came to the children. But one evening, while James was still at the office, George showed up unannounced at the townhouse's doorstep. Victoria, taken by surprise, found herself face to face with the patriarch once again. And this time, he wore a disarmingly pleasant expression, as though wanting to bridge the gap, if only for his own agenda. George Harrington had always been a formidable figure, but on this particular visit, he wore a softer air, an unsettling shift that put Victoria on guard. Nevertheless, she allowed him inside, aware that turning him away might spark more conflict. "Where are the children?" he asked politely, though his tone carried authority. He scanned the tasteful interior, pausing briefly on the family photographs James had hastily arranged on a mantel. "They're at day camp," Victoria replied, crossing her arms. "James will pick them up later." George nodded, taking a seat in the living room. Silence stretched between them, tension thrumming like a tight string. Finally, George cleared his throat. "Look, I know we've had our differences. I wasn't particularly warm to you during your marriage to James." Victoria raised an eyebrow at the understatement. "You made it clear you didn't approve." His gaze flicked downward. "My approach has always been pragmatic, especially in business. I worried you were a distraction for James, but I see now your children are a reality he must embrace. And as their grandfather, I want to be part of their lives." She studied him, noting the wrinkles etched by age, and wondered if this was genuine remorse or just another angle of control. "They don't even know who you are," she said quietly. "They don't know you exist." A flicker of pain crossed George's face, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "I realize I'm late to the table, and I won't pretend to understand your choices. But they are my grandchildren. I can give them opportunities beyond measure, private schools, connections in all fields. Why not let me help shape their future?" Victoria's shoulders tensed. This was precisely what she had feared, the Harrington brand overshadowing the kids' individuality. "They're not pieces on a chessboard, Mr. Harrington. I want them to grow, discover their passions, and choose their paths without being molded into the Harrington legacy." George leaned back, exhaling. "You misunderstand. I'm not trying to take them away, but I was once in James's position, young, ambitious, and uncertain. I know how tough it can be. Perhaps we can come to an understanding. Let me assist in their education. Let me at least meet them." Victoria swallowed, her mind whirling. Could she deny the twins a chance to know their grandfather? Despite her reservations, she recognized that they deserved to form their own opinions. "That's up to James," she said finally, "and eventually up to the children themselves. I won't stand in their way if they decide they want to know you." George nodded, something akin to relief softening his features. "That's all I ask for now." As he stood to leave, Victoria couldn't help the uneasy feeling curling in her chest. She sensed that George Harrington's intentions were far from resolved, and if the past was any indication, a storm of conflicting agendas lay on the horizon. Weeks turned into a month, and the Harrington household in New York found a precarious balance. James's leadership stabilized Harrington innovations, halting Maxwell Cunningham's grab for power. Slowly, stock prices began to recover, and the board tension eased. Meanwhile, the twins adapted to city life better than Victoria had anticipated. Lily adored the vibrant museums, and Noah found an unexpected passion for coding lessons at a local youth center. Still, drama simmered beneath the surface. Paparazzi photos of James and the children began circulating online. Speculation about their identity grew rampant. Some gossip blogs even hinted that the twins might be James's long-lost offspring. The rumor mill buzzed, pressuring James's PR team to come up with a statement. They decided to remain silent for the time being, but the hush only fueled more speculation. One afternoon, as Victoria was walking Lily home from the park, Lily mentioned that a strange man with a camera had called out to her. Panicked, Victoria rushed them back to the townhouse. She and James realized that living under constant watch was no way for the children to have a normal life. But a far greater scare arrived without warning. Early one morning, Noah woke up complaining of severe abdominal pain. He doubled over, sweating and feverish. Alarmed, James and Victoria rushed him to the hospital. Doctors performed urgent scans and blood tests, suspecting appendicitis. Lily clung to Victoria, tears streaming down her face, while James paced the waiting room, heart pounding like a drum in his ears. Eventually, a doctor approached, wearing a reassuring smile. "It's appendicitis, but we caught it early. We'll operate immediately. He'll be fine, but we need to proceed quickly." Terror and relief collided in James's chest. He signed the paperwork with shaky hands, cursing himself for not protecting his son. Victoria was by his side, equally distraught. It struck him how their old animosity evaporated in the face of a medical crisis. They held each other, waiting anxiously for news. The surgery was straightforward, and within a few hours, Noah was resting in a recovery room, looking pale but stable. The doctor assured them he would be well enough to return home within a couple of days. That night, James sat at Noah's bedside, gently holding his son's hand. The beep of the hospital monitors punctuated the silence. When Noah stirred awake, he blinked up at James and whispered, "You stayed." James swallowed back tears. "Of course I stayed. I'll always be here for you." In that profound moment, father and son shared a connection that transcended the storms of the past. But neither knew that outside the hospital walls, the press had caught wind of the emergency. By morning, headlines blazed. James Harrington's secret son rushed to hospital, confirmed father of twins. A tidal wave of attention was about to crash over them all. The next day, the hospital lobby was flooded with reporters and photographers clamoring for details. James's PR team scrambled to contain the situation, but rumors had solidified into fact. The children were indeed his. Victoria, attempting to protect Lily and Noah from the media storm, urged James to release a statement to diffuse the frenzy. So he did. In a brief but heartfelt press conference, James Harrington publicly acknowledged Noah and Lily as his children. He spoke of the joy they brought into his life, the shock of discovering them so late, and his determination to shield them from the intrusive glare of public life. At his side stood Victoria, hand in his, her eyes both fearful and resolute. The fallout was swift. Some tabloids indulged in lurid speculation about their rocky past, but to James's relief, the general public response was surprisingly sympathetic. People were moved by the story of a father fighting for a relationship with children he never knew existed. In a twist James never anticipated, this wave of empathy bolstered Harrington Innovations' public image, humanizing him in the eyes of consumers and investors alike. George Harrington, while initially skeptical of going public, soon recognized the advantage. He visited Noah and Lily, bringing them small gifts and carefully measured affection. The children, curious about this silver-haired figure, accepted his presence with polite caution. For now, George seemed content to maintain a respectful distance, perhaps sensing that heavy-handedness would only backfire. As Noah recovered, he faced a sudden outpouring of media attention, but James's PR team made it clear that reporters were to keep their distance. Lily, curious by nature, peppered her parents with questions about why reporters cared so much, prompting gentle explanations about fame and boundaries. In time, the family made a pivotal decision. They would leave New York at the end of the summer, returning to Boston so the twins could resume their normal school year. But James would divide his time more equitably, spending part of each week in Boston. Victoria, in turn, agreed to occasional extended stays in New York when corporate demands peaked. It was a careful balance, an imperfect one, but a step toward a united future. On their last night in the grand townhouse, James and Victoria sat in the courtyard garden, the children fast asleep upstairs. The stars glimmered overhead, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. "We've come a long way," Victoria murmured, her gaze drifting to the lit windows above, where the children dreamt. James nodded, a quiet smile on his lips. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful we got a second chance, not just with them, but with each other." Her eyes shimmered. "Maybe this time we'll get it right." They shared a moment of understanding. Though old wounds still lingered, they now had something priceless: hope, renewed love for their children, and a determination to face life's challenges together. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the life of James Harrington, a man forced to confront his past and discover the greatest surprise of all: he was a father to twins. In facing the shock of betrayal and the challenge of redemption, James and Victoria realized that love, understanding, and compromise can bridge even the deepest divides. Their emotional roller coaster, complete with corporate battles, family drama, medical scares, and a relentless media spotlight, reminds us that true wealth lies in the bonds we cultivate, not just in the fortunes we build. If you found yourself glued to every twist and turn, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping, heartwarming, and dramatic stories like this one to life. Join us next time for another tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat.